Tonight, we are traveling into the world of Alexander the Great, a time ruled by ambition and restless horizons, where armies moved like tides across continents, and every sunrise carried the weight of another choice. But beneath the clamor of conquest, something quieter stirred, whispers of loyalty and betrayal, the weight of destiny, and the silent ache inside every soldier's chest. Get comfortable. Pull your blanket close and feel the edge of the day soften into warm shadows. Let your breathing slow, steady, and deep as distant memories of bronze shields and marching drums fade into gentle murmurs. If these cozy history stories help you drift off, feel free to like and subscribe. In the comments, tell me what you enjoyed most and what you'd love to see improved. Your comments truly help us continue. Now, follow me through deserts, jungles, and ancient stone halls as we walk beside Alexander the Great and let history lull you quietly to sleep. Cool morning mist clings to the hills of Macedon, and in the royal palace at Pella, a young boy with bright, restless eyes watches soldiers train in the courtyard. His name is Alexander, prince of a rugged kingdom that neighbors Greece, and from the first breath he takes, people whisper that his footsteps echo louder than others. He stands small beside towering warriors, but his curiosity is larger than any shield hanging on the wall. He listens to the clang of iron on wood. He studies how horses respond to whispered commands. Even now, he wonders how fear and courage fit together, like puzzle stones in an ancient wall. His father, King Philip II, is a hurricane of ambition. He reshapes Macedon, building a professional army with long sarissa spears and discipline sharper than arrowheads. When Philip enters a room, laughter stops, as if even jokes fear him. Alexander watches carefully. He learns that power is not just force, it is presence. At meals, nobles describe distant battles. Alexander leans closer, enjoying stories more than roasted meat. He promises himself he will never be bored, even if he has to conquer boredom itself. His mother, Olympias, nurtures a different side. She surrounds him with rituals, myths, and legends. She whispers of Achilles, hero of Troy, whose rage and glory burn hot through the centuries. Alexander touches the pages of old poems, and his pulse quickens. In the palace stables, sunlight slants across dust motes, and a wild stallion named Bucephalus kicks at frightened grooms. The animal snorts, eyes wide like swirling storms. Philip shakes his head, ready to send the beast away. Alexander steps forward, calm as deep water. He notices the horse fears its own shadow, so he turns Bucephalus toward the sun. The stallion breathes, relaxes, and bows its head. When Alexander mounts and rides across the courtyard in a smooth arc, cheers erupt. Philip's voice cracks with pride, and he murmurs that Macedon will be too small for his son's dreams. But for a moment, Alexander only smiles because he has a new friend, one with 4 hooves and an enormous appetite. Even future conquerors know how to bond over snacks. Days pass into seasons. Alexander trains with spear and sword. Sweat stings his eyes. He falls, rises, and falls again. His tutors press strange languages upon him. He learns names of rivers beyond mountains. When his arms tremble, he keeps going, repeating quiet promises inside his head. Late at night, in the palace library, he whispers to ancient pages. He pictures cities crumbling, empires kneeling, and wonders if destiny is something chosen or something that chooses you. Sometimes he is just a boy, bruised and annoyed, wishing for simpler games. Other times, he stands on a balcony, watching the moon shine on the palace walls and feels the world leaning closer, like it is listening to him breathe. One afternoon, he walks past soldiers drilling with sarissa pikes. The spears look impossibly long, like fishing rods built for giants. He laughs softly, thinking that capturing a fish with one of those would require very patient fish. Even in childhood, rumors swirl like dust storms. Some say he descends from Zeus. Others whisper he might be touched by fate. Alexander hears every rumor, but he focuses on steel, sweat, and strategy. He learns that destiny means nothing without practice. As he sleeps, dawn edges across his window. War drums echo from the training fields. The future approaches, not with roaring thunder, but with the quiet tap, tap, tap of boots marching in the mist. Soon, everything will change. Soft morning light spills across polished stone floors, and the palace at Mieza grows quiet, almost reverent. A new teacher walks its halls, and whispers follow him like respectful shadows. His name is Aristotle, a philosopher with a keen gaze that sees not only what is, but what could be. When Alexander first meets him, there is a long silence, like two flints ready to spark. Aristotle does not speak loudly. He speaks precisely. He teaches that the world is made of questions, and every question is a key. Alexander listens, perched on the edge of his seat, as if one wrong breath might scatter the ideas floating between them. They walk in gardens cut with marble paths. Aristotle points to leaves and insects, explaining how nature follows patterns the way soldiers follow orders. Alexander never thought an ant could have discipline, but here he is, learning from their tiny marches. Sometimes he chuckles, imagining ants forming a phalanx, shields made of crumbs. That is light joke number 3, and the ants would probably be offended if they heard it. Scrolls pile around the young prince. Lessons stretch from dawn to dusk. He learns poetry, logic, ethics, and the names of stars that shine above distant lands. Aristotle's voice becomes a calm river, and Alexander dips his thoughts into it again and again. Soon he sees patterns everywhere, in shadows, in politics, even in the way stable hands speak when they are nervous. Sometimes Alexander challenges his teacher. Are heroes born or built through the fire of hardship? Aristotle raises a brow and replies that both answers can be true. Ambition must have roots, but it grows best in unpredictable storms. Alexander files this away like a secret weapon. News arrives from the frontiers. Philip pushes borders outward, crushing rivals with clever reforms. Alexander watches soldiers return, their armor dull and dented, and their eyes far older than their faces. He aches to ride with them, but he is still learning, sharpening the blade of his mind. During a quiet afternoon, Aristotle teaches him the value of observation. A good commander sees more than what enemies show. Alexander imagines reading battlefields like open pages. He imagines shaping armies like painters shape color. A thrill climbs his spine. Bucephalus, now older and calmer, grazes nearby. Alexander brushes the horse's mane while reciting lines from Homer. The stallion flicks its ears, perhaps unimpressed by classical poetry, but the bond between boy and beast deepens. The court buzzes with debate. Some nobles whisper that philosophy is a distraction. Others argue it sharpens leadership like a whetstone scraps a blade. Alexander feels both currents tugging at him, but he continues studying. He wants to understand why kingdoms fall, why men follow, and what courage really tastes like. Aristotle introduces politics wrapped in metaphor. He speaks of city-states as living organisms. Some grow healthy with debate, others rot from envy. Alexander wonders if glory can cure illness or if too much ambition is poison. His teacher only smiles, leaving the question drifting like incense. Seasons rotate again. Alexander grows taller, sharper, quieter. He learns self-control, though the fire in his chest sometimes strains its leash. He reads about Asia, Persia, and the vast empire that stretches beyond deserts. The names alone feel like drums. He can almost hear them. Training continues alongside study. He spars with older boys, each strike echoing the lessons on strategy Aristotle whispers in the mornings. He discovers that knowledge without action is like an unsaddled horse, beautiful, but going nowhere. One night, under starlight, the philosopher sits beside him. He points to constellations, threading stories of heroes into the dark. Alexander wonders if he belongs up there someday, glittering among myths. He fears that thought, but he cannot deny it. Rumors slither through the court. Philip's influence grows. Jealousy shadows the corners. Alexander watches quietly, knowing that knowledge can be both lantern and blade. Aristotle teaches restraint, reminding him that patience can win battles before swords ever touch. A messenger arrives with scrolls from Athens. Rich ideas flow through Maeza like wine. Alexander laughs at one philosopher's essay on laziness, thinking that perhaps the author simply needed a nap. He would have understood. Even young princes get tired. Sometimes, Alexander stands alone in the garden, listening. He thinks he hears destiny humming. A warm breeze passes, rustling leaves, and the world feels vast and inviting. He breathes deeply and feels ready, even though he does not know for what. By the time the lessons at Mieza draw to a close, something has quietly transformed. Alexander no longer looks at the world. He studies it. He no longer imagines cities. He envisions entire campaigns. The fire in his chest is no longer wild. It is focused, controlled, waiting. He saddles Bucephalus before dawn, trotting out into chilled air. Soldiers nod respectfully. The prince is still young, but his eyes carry depth beyond years. He has learned to see not just the world that exists, but the world that could be shaped by will. Soon, he will be tested. Dusk settles over the palace at Pella, and long shadows stretch between marble columns like dark fingers. The air feels tense, as if even the wind holds its breath. Alexander walks the halls with a sharper purpose now, no longer the boy who rides laughing in the courtyard, but not yet the man others will follow into unknown lands. The world waits, unblinking. Rumors whisper of assassins lurking beyond the borders. Rivals plot in smoky taverns, and noble families exchange cold glances at feasts. King Philip expands Macedon like a roaring flame, and every flame casts jealous shadows. Alexander watches, listens, and learns where pride hides its knives. He begins leading small units in training. You see him step into dusty practice fields, spear raised, eyes focused. He breathes slowly, letting Aristotle's calm settle in his muscles. The clatter of shields echoes through the air. He calls commands not with volume, but with authority that vibrates through bone. The soldiers around him shift, finding new rhythm, following his voice almost instinctively. Even the veterans mutter that the prince thinks like a commander, not a child. But tension coils at home. Philip takes a new wife, and palace alliances shift like sand beneath bare feet. Olympias fumes quietly, and Alexander feels the sting of insult carved deep into family pride. He withdraws, sharpening his thoughts like hidden daggers. Love and loyalty twist together, an uncomfortable knot he cannot untie. A royal wedding becomes a storm. Voices rise, wine spills, insults hover like wasps. Alexander responds with heat, his words cutting sharper than any blade. He storms from the hall, heart pounding, the world shaking beneath his stride. For weeks afterward, silence hangs heavy between father and son, as if a thin wall separates them, more fragile than one might think. Yet time has a strange patience. Threats gather beyond Macedon's borders. While Philip plans a grand campaign against Persia, disaster strikes. During a celebration, the king falls to an assassin's strike, as sudden as thunder in clear sky. Gasps freeze in the air, torches flicker, and the world changes with one blade. Alexander stands motionless, shock twisting through his thoughts. He feels grief, anger, fear, and something else, a pull. A pull he has sensed his whole life. Chaos erupts. Enemies sharpen their hunger. Rebellions stir in Greek city-states. Foreign powers whisper that Macedon has lost its teeth. But inside the palace, the young prince does not tremble. He acts. He claims the throne with measured movements and words that ring like iron. He secures loyal generals. He orders purges of traitorous nobles who hoped to carve Macedon apart like a loaf of bread on festival day. His voice does not shake, even though his hands sometimes tighten when no one watches. Soon, envoys arrive from Athens and Thebes, eyes glinting with defiance. They believe the boy king will fail. They believe Macedon has lost its storm. Alexander answers not with speeches, but with marching boots. You see him ride at the head of his army, Bucephalus pounding earth beneath hooves like thunder. Armor gleams in morning light, and spears rise in bristling ranks. Cities quake at the sight. Some surrender quickly. Others forget the strength of Macedon's phalanx, learned under Philip and perfected under Alexander's sharp gaze. In one campaign, his forces move with such speed that foes barely lift shields before surrendering. He offers mercy where possible, learning that fear and admiration are two sides of the same coin. A small joke flits through the ranks that if Alexander ever naps, he dreams of conquering chores too. Even commanders chuckle, though quietly. Victories grow, respect spreads. The boy prince becomes a young king with a reputation sharper than spear points. He holds councils late into the night, discussing logistics, supply lines, terrain, and morale. He learns which generals argue to impress and which speak to win. He watches carefully, the way Aristotle taught, reading faces more than words. But ambition gnaws gently. It whispers of Persia across the sea. It whispers of glory immortal. He feels the hum of destiny again, a familiar vibration beneath his ribs. As winter falls, snow drifts across palace roofs, softening Macedon's harsh edges. Alexander stands on a balcony, breath blooming in pale clouds. He thinks of his father, of unfinished plans, of rumors swirling in Persian courts. He thinks of Aristotle's reminder. A wise leader does not chase every battle. He chooses the right one. Spring thaw brings new momentum. Rebellions crumble. Allies pledge loyalty. And the army stands ready, scarred, disciplined, hungry. Alexander walks through the camp, nodding to weary soldiers. He smells smoke, leather, and metal. He hears laughter near fire pits, and he notices even tired men straighten as he passes. They do not simply serve a king. They believe in the weight of his gaze. He mounts Bucephalus beneath a sky streaked with dawn. He looks toward distant horizons where lands stretch further than stories have dared to describe. His heart pounds once, twice, steady as war drums. War waits, glory waits. The world waits. And now he is ready to answer. But before we continue tonight's story, if you really enjoy these history stories, please like the video and subscribe. Dawn spills gold across Macedon's training grounds, where rows of soldiers adjust armor straps, test spear points, and murmur quiet prayers. Alexander rides slowly between them, feeling the heartbeat of an army beneath his fingertips, a pulse that stretches far beyond a single kingdom. Greek city-states watch from afar, eyes narrowed, each convinced their independence is sacred, ancient, and unbreakable. Yet the young king approaches with calm determination, not cruelty, and the map begins to tremble at its edges. First, he moves south toward Thessaly. Rumors outrun his arrival like startled birds, and by the time Macedonian boots strike the Thessalian soil, local leaders hesitate. They know Philip's reforms made the phalanx nearly unshakable. Now, Alexander commands that same weapon with the velocity of lightning. After brief negotiations, Thessaly joins him, impressed by speed, diplomacy, and the sight of Sarissa spears angled like iron forests. Even in concession, they mutter admiration, as if surrender feels oddly noble when facing a storm. Continuing south, he reaches the famed pass of Thermopylae. Shadows of Spartan legend still linger there, whispering of heroic last stands. Alexander pauses only a moment, honoring memory with silence. He understands history is not made alone. It stands on bones, sweat, and sacrifice. He rides onward, chasing unity as if it were prey. In Athens, philosophers argue fiercely. Some predict Macedon will crumble without Philip's mind. Others warn that youth does not mean weakness. When news arrives that Alexander has already seized strategic routes with almost playful ease, those debates quiet into awkward coughs. One joking student claims he blinked once and missed the entire campaign. Perhaps coffee would help. That earns a few nervous laughs. Humor always survives turbulent politics. Thebes, however, chooses defiance. Walls rise, gates slam, and messages drip with arrogance. They believe Macedon's young king cannot match Philip's iron will. Alexander sighs softly, not out of fear, but disappointment. He once studied among Greeks. He respected their culture. Yet unity requires consequences. In a blur of movement and dust, Macedonian forces surround Thebes. The phalanx advances like a slow, grinding machine. Cavalry arcs around flank positions, precision cutting through defense like glass splintering. Trumpets echo, shields clash, streets fill with the roar of command. Resistance collapses faster than expected. Shock ripples outward. When the smoke thins, Thebes lies broken. Alexander orders certain homes spared, temples protected, and enslaved citizens treated fairly. He does not love destruction, but he knows mercy without consequence births further rebellion. Word spreads across Greece like wildfire dipped in oil. City-states fall silent. Even proud Sparta hesitates. Letters arrive acknowledging Alexander as hegemon of the Hellenic League. Now Greece stands unified, not as shattered voices, but as a single coalition aimed toward Persia, the towering empire across the Aegean Sea. In the evenings, Alexander studies maps by flickering lamplight. Lines trace coasts, rivers, deserts. Dots mark garrisons, supply routes, and harvest seasons. He imagines battles like living puzzles, each piece sliding into place. Commanders gather around him quietly, astonished at how swiftly he calculates risk and opportunity. When someone suggests they must conquer Persia to avenge past invasions, Alexander simply nods, though a faint smile flickers. He aims not only to avenge history, but to write his own. He trains relentlessly. Sword strikes cut through cold morning air. Horse hooves drum patterns into earth. Every day sharpens his instincts like a blade against stone. During one sparring session, a soldier complains that armor feels heavier than expected. Alexander jokes it is simply the weight of responsibility, causing nearby veterans to chuckle as they adjust their own helmets. Meanwhile, his diplomats weave threads across Greek courts. They promise spoils, honor, and shared victory. Many leaders accept begrudgingly, but they accept nonetheless. They have seen enough marching boots to understand when history refuses negotiation. In Corinth, scholars greet him with cautious respect. They discuss strategy, governance, and ethics around tall amphoras and steaming bread. One elderly thinker challenges him, asking whether unity under force can ever be truly stable. Alexander replies that unity prevents chaos, and chaos spills blood faster than any sword. The philosopher nods slowly, impressed by the balance of steel and thought. As seasons shift, Greece grows quiet, almost peaceful. Farmers return to fields. Traders unload ships. Children laugh in narrow streets where tension once clung like rain-soaked cloaks. Yet beneath calm soil, the roots of ambition twist deeper. Then, across blue waters, Persia watches. Their king believes Macedon is a minor annoyance, a spark that winds will extinguish. Alexander hears this through whispers and chuckles softly, stroking Bucephalus's neck. He has learned from Aristotle. Never underestimate something small. Even ants can build empires of crumbs. Final preparations accelerate. Engineers count siege equipment. Quartermasters tally grain. Shipwrights hammer planks, sending sawdust drifting like golden snow. Alexander inspects everything. He demands structure, discipline, and precision. Not because he doubts his men, but because he cannot risk chaos against a giant. He walks campfires at night, cape fluttering in smoke, listening to soldiers dream aloud about Persia's riches. He hears fear, too, disguised in nervous laughter. He reassures quietly, never boasting. Confidence flows from him like warmth from burning coals. As spring blooms again, he stands upon a coastal cliff. Waves crash below, eager to carry fleets eastward. He breathes deeply, tasting salt and destiny. Behind him, Greece stands unified, sometimes by persuasion, sometimes by force, but united nevertheless. Alexander lifts his hand. Commanders salute. Ships creak proudly in the harbor wind. The age of conquest has begun. Morning mist drifts across the Hellespont, that narrow blue vein dividing Europe from Asia. For generations, Greeks have spoken of this stretch of water as the edge of the known world. Now, Alexander stands at its shore, armor gleaming like sunrise, wind tugging his cloak. Behind him, Greece is united, disciplined, and watching. Before him, Persia waits, vast, ancient, and magnificent. Between them, only the sea whispers. He takes a deep breath, then strides toward a waiting ship. The deck creaks, waves slap against hulls, and 1,000 soldiers murmur prayers to the gods of luck and courage. Alexander stares eastward, feeling the pulse of history under his boots. When he throws a spear across the water, it lands quivering in Asian soil. He smiles softly and says, "From Europe to Asia, this shall be our bridge." It is part ceremony, part declaration, part destiny. The fleet sails across under calm weather. Sails fill like lungs, oars slice water in perfect rhythm. At dawn, the sun rises behind Asia's coast, gilding mountains and villages in pale gold. Alexander disembarks first, kneeling to touch foreign ground. He offers a brief sacrifice to the gods and to the spirit of Troy, where Greek heroes once clashed with Eastern kings. For him, this is more than war. It is continuation, a thread of myth renewed through his veins. The army marches inland toward the river Granicus. Persian satraps, governors ruling provinces, have gathered forces to repel him. Their banners ripple across the hillsides, a riot of color under blinding sunlight. Alexander studies the terrain. Steep banks, strong currents, enemy cavalry waiting across the water. His generals advise caution. He listens, nods, then quietly rejects hesitation. Timing, he murmurs, is the heartbeat of victory. Trumpets blast. The Macedonian phalanx advances, spears glinting like needles of light. Horses plunge into the river, riders leaning forward, armor splashed with icy spray. Persian arrows whistle overhead. Shields rattle. Alexander leads from the front, Bucephalus charging through water like a creature of legend. His helmet plume flickers red through chaos. He strikes one Persian noble clean from the saddle, then another. Men around him rally, voices rising like thunder. The river becomes a storm of willpower. Soon Persian lines waver. Discipline and strategy carve through their defenses. When the dust clears, the banks of Granicus belong to Macedon. Losses are counted, honors given. Alexander personally tends to wounded soldiers, walking among tents at dusk. He praises courage, mourns the fallen, and reminds everyone that glory demands memory, not arrogance. Even in triumph, humility glows faintly beneath the armor. After victory, Greek cities once under Persian rule open their gates to him. Statues are draped with flowers, flutes sing in the streets, and locals hail him as liberator rather than conqueror. He restores democracy where possible, leaves garrisons for order, and continues eastward without lingering. Momentum is his ally. Hesitation is his enemy. In captured treasuries, his men marvel at Persian luxury, carpets soft as whispers, gold cups heavy as gilt, perfumes swirling through air like liquid sunlight. Alexander studies these things briefly, then moves on. He has little patience for comfort. He prefers maps, strategies, and the restless sound of marching boots. That night, around campfires, soldiers tell exaggerated tales of their king. They say arrows bend away from him mid-flight. They say Bucephalus can sense treachery. Alexander overhears one such tale and laughs quietly, remarking that if the horse truly sensed treachery, he would never stand near half his officers. Even exhausted soldiers chuckle at that. The campaign rolls forward through Phrygia. The landscape shifts. Open plains, scattered ruins, markets heavy with spice and rumor. Merchants stare wide-eyed at the disciplined Macedonian columns passing like an iron tide. Alexander pauses briefly at ancient Troy, placing a wreath on Achilles' supposed tomb. He whispers, "I shall meet you in deeds, not words." In that moment, the boy who once read Homer in candlelight now stands beside his childhood idol. Supplies flow from the coast. Engineers repair bridges. Scout riders dash ahead. Aristotle's teachings echo faintly in Alexander's mind. Observe, understand, adapt. And he does. He recruits local guides, learns Persian customs, and orders interpreters to travel alongside troops. Where his father conquered by fear, Alexander seeks loyalty through respect. One evening, as fires dim and crickets hum, He stands alone, staring toward distant mountain ridges. Behind those peaks, Persian heartlands wait, impossibly vast. He feels a twinge of awe, not doubt, as if realizing he has begun something that might never truly end. The next day, news arrives that Darius, the great king himself, prepares to meet him with an enormous army. Alexander listens quietly, expression unreadable. Then he smiles. "Good," he says. "Let the world know I have crossed." The soldiers cheer until their throats burn, the sound rolling through valleys like a promise. In their minds, they are no longer Macedonians, Greeks, or allies. They are part of something larger, something immortal. As stars rise, Alexander returns to his tent. He removes his armor, traces a map's inked lines, and whispers softly to the candle flame. "Asia has seen kings before, but it has not seen me." Outside, the wind changes direction, blowing eastward. Dust drifts across the ancient road as you march toward the city of Gordium. The air tastes of clay and copper, and the sky above seems to deepen with every mile. Alexander rides ahead, thoughtful and quiet, his eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for invisible threads of fate. Rumors have followed the army like camp dogs. A legendary knot sits locked within an old wooden cart, tied by kings long gone, waiting for the man destined to rule all of Asia. Every soldier knows the story. Some laugh, others whisper. A few touch small charms tucked inside their tunics, just in case destiny is listening. The city greets your arrival with cautious celebration, its streets crowded with traders, priests, and curious gazes. Temple bells ring softly, like distant chimes rolling through the air. Alexander dismounts, following local priests through painted gates into a quiet courtyard. In the center stands the chariot, older than memory, its wood dark and polished by countless hands. Thick ropes coil around the yoke in chaotic loops, twisted so tightly that no beginning or ending can be found. The knot looks less like skill and more like stubbornness turned into artwork. Priests murmur the prophecy again. Whoever unravels the Gordian knot will become master of Asia. Your stomach tightens. It is the kind of story that weighs more than armor. Alexander steps closer, studying the knot. He touches the rope, testing its fibers with careful fingertips. The court watches, silent and wide-eyed. It feels as though even the wind has paused, leaning in to listen. For a long moment, the world shrinks to rope, wood, and breath. Some soldiers whisper advice, quietly enough so that no one hears. One suggests picking at loose threads, as if this were a lazy afternoon sewing task. Another imagines soaking it in water, then laughs nervously at his own ridiculous idea. A third jokes that perhaps the knot should be bribed. Unfortunately, his coin would likely be swallowed by rope. Alexander tries tugging different cords, but the knot refuses, stubborn as a mule in spring. He frowns, thoughtful rather than frustrated. You watch his eyes as they shift, glancing not only at the rope, but at the bigger picture. A problem created to never be solved in the expected way. Then, without ceremony, Alexander reaches for his sword. The blade gleams in the courtyard sunlight, bright enough to make you blink. With one clean stroke, he splits the knot in two. The ropes fall away, spilling like severed vines. Gasps scatter across the courtyard like startled birds. There is a heartbeat of silence before relief washes over the crowd. Priests nod in approval, their expressions surprisingly calm. You can almost hear the prophecy exhale. Alexander wipes the blade, sheathes it, and turns toward his commanders. His voice is steady. It does not matter how the knot is undone, only that it is. Some soldiers grin, others shake their heads in disbelief, and at least one mutters something about sword-based problem-solving being useful for tangled shoelaces back home. That evening, the camp glows with torchlight, flickering against canvas walls. You sit by a small fire, listening to conversations drift around you. The men speak with brighter eyes, their voices edged with confidence. The knot has become more than rope. It has become a symbol. Obstacles do not intimidate the king. They invite creativity. Alexander walks through camp, offering quiet nods and small comments to his captains. His presence settles the air like a warm blanket. You cannot ignore the invisible shift in morale. Hope pours through the ranks faster than wine. Later, under a blanket of stars, you look toward the dark silhouette of the ancient chariot. You wonder if destiny truly cares about knots, ropes, or cuts. Perhaps destiny watches for those who refuse to be trapped by tradition, who dare to move sideways when the world expects forward. A cool breeze brushes across your cheek, carrying faint music from a distant tavern. A trembling flute, a low drum, the gentle murmur of voices drifting into night. You breathe deeply, feeling your heartbeat slow. For a moment, the world feels so wide that you could fall into its quiet forever. And tomorrow, you will march deeper into Asia, where new puzzles wait in the dusty valleys and shining cities. But tonight, sleep settles gently, as if some cosmic knot inside your mind has loosened too. Dawn spills pale light across the narrow coastal plain near Issus, where mountains press close against the sea, turning open land into a funnel of rock and wind. Alexander rides along the front lines, his horse stamping softly in the cool sand, and you sense tension curling through the air like smoke. News spreads quickly. King Darius himself has marched north, bringing a massive Persian host. The scale of it makes your stomach flutter, as if butterflies are practicing gymnastics inside your armor. You grip your spear tighter. Your hands feel clammy despite the chill. Men whisper prayers. Others simply stare at the shrinking strip of land where armies must collide. Alexander studies the terrain, and you watch his eyes brighten like a strategist who has just found a secret door. Here, numbers will matter less. The mountains squeeze the field, forcing both sides into cramped formation, removing the Persian advantage, like trying to fit an elephant into a pantry. The Macedonian phalanx anchors the center, shields overlapping, spears angled forward like a field of bristling thorns. On the right, Alexander leads the companion cavalry, their silvered helmets gleaming. Your heart drums louder than the distant surf as Persian archers nock arrows, drawing lines of deadly light across the sky. The first volley arcs like dark rain, and men around you duck instinctively, though the shields catch most of the sting. Alexander lifts his arm, and the signal horn cries out. The charge begins. Feet pound earth, shields bump and rattle, breath grows hot in your throat. You crash into the enemy line with the weight of a falling wall. Spears jab, shields slam, and for a moment, the world becomes nothing but wood, bronze, and grunts of effort. Persian infantry push forward, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm the flanks. You hear shouts, feel bodies surge, and smell dust, sweat, and sharp smoke from burning brush behind the lines. Alexander sees the bulge forming in the enemy center, and without hesitation, he swings right with the companions, driving a wedge straight toward the royal guard. You follow, boots splashing through a shallow river, mud sucking noisily at your heels, as if the earth is complaining about your speed. Suddenly, above a glittering shield wall, you spot him, King Darius, high atop a chariot, his robes shimmering like poured gold. His presence is a magnet for every eye. Persian generals gesture frantically, trying to hold formation as Alexander cuts deeper, his lance finding gaps between shields. The swirl of cavalry becomes a storm of motion, horses screaming, armor clattering in broken rhythms. You thrust your spear forward, blocking a Persian officer who lunges too boldly. He stumbles, his helmet slipping sideways, and you cannot help thinking he should have tightened the strap. A short joke to yourself shivers your nerves away, settling your focus. Another rider beside you mutters that if he survives this, he will retire to sell olives, preferably in a place that never hears the word battle again. Gradually, the Persian line begins to buckle. News spreads that Darius looks uneasy, his chariot turning subtly. His fear becomes a spark in dry grass, traveling through ranks faster than any messenger. You see shields tilt backward, see men glance over shoulders, their courage draining like water from a cracked jar. Alexander presses harder, shouting for momentum, driving his horse forward through the gap with energy that feels almost wild. Then it happens. King Darius retreats. His chariot wheels spin sharply, and he flees the field. A ripple of disbelief sweeps through the Persian ranks, and suddenly their massive army fractures, breaking apart into panicked streams of men rushing toward the mountain passes. You exhale sharply, barely realizing you had held your breath for what felt like hours. Chasing is brief. The terrain narrows, making pursuit dangerous, and Alexander pulls the army back rather than risk exhaustion. As the sun sinks, its red glow paints the battlefield with a strange, dreamlike warmth. You sit on a boulder, helm resting in your lap, listening to the quiet crackle of campfires and soft groans of the wounded. Around you, soldiers speak in hushed, awed tones. They cannot believe they faced the great king's full strength and lived. Even the jokes tonight feel tired but grateful. One man whispers that perhaps Alexander carries luck in his pockets. Another replies that luck has probably been strapped to a spear. Later, Alexander walks the camp, his expression thoughtful rather than celebratory. He knows this victory opens wide doors, Persian capitals, riches, and the unraveling of ancient power. But for now, he allows a faint smile, laying a reassuring hand on the shoulders of weary men. His confidence settles the air, a gentle pressure that steadies your heartbeat. As night deepens, you lie under a canopy of sharp stars, feeling cool wind drift from the mountains. The narrow coast that trapped the armies now feels like a cradle, rocking you gently toward rest. You think of the chariot turning away, of Alexander leaning forward, eyes bright as flint. Destiny is not a quiet traveler. It charges boldly, and tonight you have ridden beside it. Morning sunlight glitters along the coast as your army marches south, the roar of waves echoing against a line of rocky cliffs. Stories of the last battle have already raced ahead of you like excited dogs, and coastal cities surrender with open gates and polite bows. All is smooth until one proud island refuses. Tyre. It rises from the sea like a stubborn tooth, a walled island fortress sitting just far enough offshore to mock every ladder and ram in your arsenal. Tyrian envoys greet Alexander politely from their walls, voices drifting across the water, suggesting he can visit someday, perhaps as a tourist. You hear nervous laughter ripple through the Macedonian ranks. Alexander's jaw tightens. No king likes to be given sightseeing hours. Engineers gather, scratching rough plans into the sand. Alexander studies the tides, the current, the stubborn line of stone walls. Then he orders something absurd. A causeway built from the mainland straight to the island. Some soldiers gape. One mutters that next he will ask you to build a staircase to the moon. Another quietly suggests charging the sea, though no one volunteers to lead it. And so it begins. Stone by stone, timber by timber, you drag the land toward the sea. Waves hiss against your ankles as if offended you are stepping into their personal space. Tyrian ships patrol close, firing arrows and insults. At noon, they rain torches down, and fire hisses across damp wood. At dusk, you hear laughter drifting from their walls, mile-long jokes delivered at ocean distance. But Alexander adapts. He brings siege towers onto the growing causeway. Their sides armored with wet hides, so flame rolls down like angry paint. He calls allied fleets, and soon the bay swells with Macedonian sails. The island's confidence begins to crack. You see it in the movement of their guards, stiff and twitchy, glancing too often at the growing shadow of the causeway. Weeks pass, salt dries on your skin, and your boots feel permanently soaked. Men whisper that the sea gods are losing patience. Once, when a wave sucks stones back down with a gulping splash, a soldier swears he heard the ocean burp. Then, one bright morning, the final breach comes. A section of wall collapses under a storm of catapult stones, and the army surges forward with a roar. You sprint across the causeway, feet pounding hot timber, arrows snapping through the air like angry insects. Inside the city, the streets twist, but Alexander's men push methodically. Resistance falters. Doors open. Shouts soften. When the last cries fade, you stand atop the seawall, gazing back at the mainland. The causeway stretches across the shining water, a scar of ambition and stubborn will. Seabirds circle overhead, as if scolding you for redecorating their favorite landing pad. Alexander does not celebrate loudly. He studies the horizon again, eyes searching beyond the victory you just earned. Something greater calls him forward. And so, the march continues past blazing sands and ruined temples into Egypt. The Nile greets you like a cool breath after fever, its waters humming softly in the wind. Green banks unfurl like velvet carpets, and farmers wave from small, neat fields. Instead of defiance, you find welcome. Egypt, tired of Persian rule, accepts Alexander like returning sunshine. Priests lead you to vast temples where incense curls in lazy golden spirals, and carved gods stare with half smiles from high stone pillars. One evening, you are summoned to the temple of the oracle at Siwa. The desert there is wide and whispering, sand rolling in slow waves under an endless sky. You travel deep, guided by priests who barely speak, as if silence itself is sacred here. A breeze strokes your face, cool despite the afternoon heat. Sand grains rattle softly, like tiny bones dancing in cups. Inside the sanctuary, the oracle's voice is low and distant, like wind echoing inside a canyon. What she tells Alexander is quiet, known only to him. But when he steps out, his expression is changed, serene, but fierce. Rumors leap through campfires that the oracle called him son of Zeus, hinting he bears divine blood. Some soldiers whisper with awe, Others grin and shrug, saying they already suspected he had help from somewhere above. Soon after, on a blank stretch of coast, Alexander kneels and draws lines in the sand. He sketches walls, streets, harbors, a city born from imagination. He names it Alexandria. You help unload building materials, and even in its infancy, the place hums with promise. Scribes, scholars, sailors. It calls them like a lighthouse calls ships. Nights in Egypt are soft. Crickets hum. Palms sway slowly. Stars hang like lanterns in the black sky. You sleep easier here, dreaming of river reeds swaying in warm breezes. But the calm cannot hold forever. Maps soon unroll across thick tables, Persian heartlands carved in ink and ambition. You watch Alexander study them, his finger tracing routes deep into the empire's beating center. The Nile sighs behind you, as if wishing you would stay. But destiny does not nap in the sun. It gallops eastward, and tomorrow you will saddle up once again. A pale moon hangs low as you march beneath its silver glow, the desert wind brushing sand across your boots. You hear rumors traded between campfires. Darius has gathered another vast army, larger than Issus, stretching across the plains like a living tapestry of iron and fear. The name of the battlefield whispers through ranks, Gaugamela. It sounds sharp, like something cracked from stone. At dawn, the sun lifts, revealing an unsettling sight. Persian workers have scraped the ground flat for chariots, broad wheels glittering with blades. Columns of cavalry shimmer in distance, and elephants sway like gray mountains ready to crush bone. The sheer size of the army drags your breath from your lungs. One soldier jokes that Persia must have borrowed troops from the moon, earning a few nervous chuckles. Alexander and his generals study the map laid over a drum. He points to the flanks, eyes bright with recognition. Here the Persians hope to surround him, to swallow his army whole. So he forms a slanted line, angled like a knife against the wind, pulling enemy cavalry outward. His voice remains calm, a steady anchor in an ocean of doubt. The horns sound. Dust rises in heavy curtains as the armies surge. Persian chariots thunder forward, blades spinning like cruel wings. You kneel behind your shield as arrows hiss past, rattling wood and bronze. Horses scream, their hooves hammering earth in frantic rhythm. Your phalanx tightens, spears jutting like the spines of a giant hedgehog. The first chariot crashes, struck by a spear that jerks it sideways. It tumbles, snapping its wheels like brittle shells. More chariots break past, but gaps open in your line. Light infantry dive through, grabbing reins, cutting harness straps, sending horses skittering away riderless. You hear cheers burst from the flanks, relief washing through your bones. Then comes the hammer blow. Persian cavalry slams into the left wing, shoving bronze against muscle, pushing you back step by shaking step. Dust burns your throat. Sweat trickles into your eyes, stinging like sandpaper tears. You plant your feet and thrust, feeling the jolt of contact up your arm. The man before you falls, his helmet bouncing once before disappearing under trampling hooves. Amid chaos, Alexander watches the center stretch thin, exactly as he planned. He flares right with his companion cavalry, charging into a widening gap. You catch a glimpse of his helmet crest slicing through rows of Persian guards. His lance finds targets with terrifying precision. He moves like fire through dry brush, leaving panic in his wake. Darius's chariot looms again, its wheels rattling over flattened ground. He stands tall at first, robes shimmering like molten gold. But his line wavers. Bodies surge and stumble around him, shields tilting backward. You feel a tremor pass through the Persian ranks as if fear snapped like a bowstring. Suddenly, Darius turns. His chariot wheels spin and he flees across the plain. A gasp ripples outward, hollowing Persian courage. The great king withdrawing is like the sun blinking out. Shouts turn to frantic cries. Spears drop. Shields tilt. Thousands begin to run. Alexander pushes forward, but does not chase blindly. He pivots, racing to rescue his left wing, which buckles under pressure. You join the push, slamming into cavalry still fighting fiercely. The ground becomes a blur of hooves and dust. For a heartbeat, you smell nothing but leather, sweat, and the harsh metallic tang of adrenaline. When the last pockets of resistance crack, the battlefield falls strangely quiet. The wind brushes across your face, cooling flushed skin. Your arms ache, your legs tremble, but a deep calm awe settles inside you. You have stood against the full weight of Persia and lived. Campfires bloom across the plain like tiny suns. Alexander's tent glows softly, and messengers come and go like wind-driven leaves. He speaks little, eyes distant. He knows this victory is not just battle. It is history bending. Persian capitals now lie open, their storerooms of gold and knowledge waiting. Around your fire, soldiers share exhausted laughter. One man declares he will retire to a quiet farm and wrestle chickens instead of armies. Another claims he spotted Darius sprinting faster than any horse. Sleepy chuckles roll across the circle. Later, you stretch beneath a tapestry of stars. The plain, once filled with thunder, now holds peaceful silence. A gentle breeze strokes your cheek, whispering of ancient cities ahead. Babylon, Susa, Persepolis. The path grows stranger, but you feel destiny leaning forward, breath warm on your ear. You close your eyes, letting the quiet carry you, as the embers fade to soft reds like distant sunsets. Rain beats like drums upon the helmets of tired men. Alexander pushes east, farther than any whispered tale has dared to wander. His army stretches behind him, thin and hollow, yet still shimmering in bronze like a long, exhausted snake. Mud rises to the ankles. The monsoon sky hangs low, swollen with storms, making every step feel like walking beneath a wet blanket. Spears sink into sludge, and sandals squish with each unhappy step. One soldier coughs and jokes that his shoes now hold more river than the actual rivers do, earning a weary laugh. Even Alexander smiles, though it is brief and thin. Dense forests crowd the path. Trees twist and spiral into shapes no Greek has ever named. Birds screech with voices that sound like metal scraping metal. Night is not dark here. It is alive, buzzing, chirping, whispering. Sleep comes slowly, like a shy guest at a harsh banquet. Alexander walks among their campfires, cape soaked, boots heavy. He keeps his voice calm, steady, promising a horizon where the rain ends. He says the edges of maps are only limits for men without courage. His soldiers nod, though some nod only because their heads are too tired to stay upright. At the Hydaspes River, the army meets a new kind of king, porous, tall and broad as a temple pillar, riding elephants like towers of muscle and bone. The animals trumpet, spraying water and fear in equal measure. Some soldiers stare, wondering if the beasts run on courage or simply on very large breakfasts. Armor glints beneath the rain, and a battle begins in thunder and mud. Alexander moves with sharp focus. He crosses the river under storm darkness, surprising the enemy. Spears clang against elephant armor, Shields rattle like thunder plates. Horses panic at the towering shapes, but Alexander steadies them, touching their necks, whispering calm as arrows fall like needles. Victory comes slowly, like tea steeping in cold water. Porus refuses to fold, standing tall even after wounds bloom across his arms. Alexander, impressed, grants him honor and land instead of chains. Respect grows between warriors, like two mountains acknowledging each other across a plain. And yet, even triumph feels heavy. The army grows quieter, their spirits thinned by distance. Memories of Greece drift like warm smoke. Clean marble, simple bread, breezes that do not smell of lightning. They gather around fires and joke about retiring as olive farmers or opening small taverns that serve nothing but dry sandals as snacks. Laughter bursts, thin but alive. Alexander watches these moments. Inside he carries a hunger that never sleeps, a fire that demands more land, more challenge, more immortality. But his men carry skin and bone, weary hearts, and homesickness thick as honey. The monsoon deepens, tents sag beneath the weight of rain. Soggy scrolls fall apart in scholars' hands, leaving ink blurred like tears. Scouts return with tales of endless jungle and armies without count, painted and fierce beneath roaring skies. The army hesitates. Whispers grow into voices. Voices grow into pleas. They stand before Alexander, eyes lowered but firm, begging to return. They speak of duty, of swollen wounds, of gods angry at their stubborn march. Their breath fogs in the damp air, forming pale clouds of desperation. Alexander hears them. He looks to the horizon, seeing crowns made of storms. For a heartbeat, he imagines pushing forward alone, riding ahead into green infinity. But ambition cannot ride without a rider, and riders need loyal hearts behind them. Rain falls harder, as if the gods nod in agreement. He gives the order to turn back. Relief sweeps through the army like sunlight through cracked shutters. Some men weep openly. Others grin so hard their cheeks cramp. A few try to dance, but slip in mud and end up inventing a very accidental new military technique, much to everyone's amusement. The march west begins. It is slow, bittersweet, and heavy with stories that will echo for centuries. Alexander walks at the front, cloak snapping like a wet banner, eyes distant. He has conquered worlds, but now faces the one thing every general fears: the quiet return. And as the road curves back toward familiar sands, the monsoon sighs behind him, letting the jungle swallow their footprints, sealing secrets beneath leaves. The long road west stretches like a faded ribbon across lands once bright with promise. Alexander marches at the front, though his steps are slower now, weighted with invisible stone. Behind him, the army trails in a weary spill of bronze and sighs, their sandals scraping dust that tastes like ash. They have seen wonders, and they have seen storms, and some part of them aches to simply sit still. Sunlight burns hotter here. At first, it feels like a welcome return from the monsoon's relentless rain, but soon becomes a harsh reminder that comfort does not always travel with familiarity. The deserts shimmer like molten glass, and even the shadows seem to sweat. Men mutter soft jokes about roasting barley on their helmets. One tries it, and the result is edible enough to make everyone laugh, though perhaps only out of desperate hope. Alexander's face is calm, but the edges soften with each passing mile. He knows pride has been wounded, not by swords, but by the refusal of distance itself. His dream was not merely to conquer, but to push the boundary of what a human hand can grasp. Now the boundary pushes back. Still, he keeps spirit steady. New cities rise, stonework unrolling like scrolls across riverbanks. Foundations are carved, marketplaces imagined. He names them as if naming prizes, though the workers wish only for a cool drink and shade. Merchants smile politely, already calculating profits, while soldiers slip away to nap behind barrels. In camp, fires crackle through dry air. Stories are traded like currency, elephants that look like mountains, storms that tasted like salt, and kings who bowed or bled. Alexander listens quietly, allowing their legends to grow roots. He does not interrupt, even when a soldier dramatically describes a spider the size of a child's helmet, earning nervous glances and one firm promise never to sleep again without sandals on. Through deserts and across barren plains, the march continues. The Gedrosian desert rises ahead, a wasteland of cracked stone and merciless wind. Heat funnels through narrow passes, pushing back like a wall. Waterskins deflate. Horses stumble. One soldier swears the sun is laughing at them. Another swears it winked. They laugh at the madness of it, because laughter keeps legs moving. Men fall. Supplies dwindle. Alexander refuses to ride when others walk, choosing dust over comfort, sweat over shelter. His cloak hangs like parchment in wind, and though his eyes burn, they never dim. It is a stubborn light, like a candle shielding itself against a howling storm. At last, the army reaches friendlier soil. Palms sway. Rivers glitter. The sight is so gentle that some men forget to breathe, afraid it might vanish like a trick of the heat. They drink until hands shake, water dripping down chins like a child's first taste of snow. Rejoining older roots, the army finds celebrations awaiting them. Parades stretch across streets, sandals beating rhythms of triumph and relief. But some corners of the cheering crowds whisper of exhaustion, of fear at how far a single will can bend history. Alexander hears none of this, or perhaps he simply chooses not to. Time softens their struggles into stories. Captains boast loudly of victories won with clever feints, ignoring that they had once trembled behind shields. Young recruits listen, wide-eyed, deciding they too will conquer the world someday. Experience smiles quietly at such ideas. In quieter moments, Alexander stares at maps, fingers tracing empty spaces where oceans whisper and mountains brood. But maps are no longer blank to him. Even silence feels conquered. His heart strains against its cage, beating for the far horizon, yet the murmur of home calls louder with each night. He gathers companions, offering encouragement and shared wine. They laugh together, though sometimes the laughter comes out hollow. A few veterans wrap themselves tightly in blankets, whispering thanks to sleeping gods that the journey turns west and not east again. The desert fades behind them. Green returns. Familiar accents drift through the air like friendly ghosts. And somewhere deep within, Alexander wrestles with something no spear has ever pierced. The quiet truth that even ambition has a limit. He closes his eyes at night, feeling armies move inside memory, battles thundering beneath his heartbeat. Yet sleep arrives slowly, as though even dreams hesitate to approach the great conqueror. Tomorrow, he will continue homeward, not defeated, only redirected. The world shifts beneath his feet, and he shifts with it. Babylon rises like a jeweled dream against the river's slow breath. Alexander enters beneath banners and cheers, though his shoulders dip ever so slightly, as if invisible fingers tug at the seams of his armor. He is older now, though the years are not many. The miles, however, are countless. Rumors slip through garden shadows, kingdoms divided, generals restless, prophecies stirring in the dust of temple floors. He fills his days with planning. Maps bloom across long tables like unfurled flower petals. He speaks of Arabia, of new fleets crossing unknown waters, of temples shaped like star patterns. His captains nod politely, though some glance sideways, measuring their thinning patience. Ambition does not age, but men do. Banquets stretch into candle-lit evenings. Laughter spills like wine, though some of it is forced. One courtier claims he saw Alexander lift a goblet heavier than his own helmet, only to admit moments later that perhaps the helmet was simply very light. The joke earns chuckles, though the eyes behind them are tired. Victory is sweet, but after too many sips, even honey can taste like ash. Alexander walks the palace gardens at night. Babylon's palms sway softly, whispering against the quiet hum of the river. Frogs croak in lazy rhythm, as if keeping time for fading footsteps. He pauses often, catching his breath, blaming the heat, blaming the dust, blaming the long years of battle that have chipped at his bones. Whispers return. Who will inherit his might? His son is not yet born. Other heirs are uncertain threads. Generals watch each other the way hawks watch mice, curious, quiet, and hungry. Alexander sees this but says little, trusting loyalty the way a sailor trusts a rope in a storm. Then fever arrives. At first, it is a gentle hand pressing on the back of his neck. He waves it away with a smirk, joking that even illness seeks to conquer him. But the hand becomes a fist, tightening, burning. His voice weakens, though he tries to disguise it with humor, telling one doctor that if his temperature rises any higher, the palace chefs might use him to boil soup. Days blur. He lies upon cushions, breath fluttering like a moth's wings. Captains crowd the room, their shadows stretching long and thin across cooled stone. Alexander tries to speak. Words slide into whispers. He gestures toward his signet ring, then to his commanders, eyes filled with meaning too large for language. They ask, who shall inherit? He answers softly, almost teasingly, to the strongest. Some hear destiny, others hear warning, but all feel the crack through the empire's spine. His gaze drifts to the ceiling, painted with stars. They seem to shimmer, though perhaps that is only the fever's touch. He remembers battles beneath real skies, the ring of swords, the warmth of campfires, the endless horizon calling like a playful dare. He remembers his horse's steady heartbeat, the smell of sun on leather, the taste of victory crisp and sharp as autumn air. Around him, soldiers gather quietly. They file past, touching his hand, murmuring thanks, stories, prayers. Some weep openly, others stand rigid, unwilling to let tears betray them. They speak of Greece, of deserts, of elephants, of storms that smelled like wet iron. Alexander listens with half-closed eyes, smiling faintly at memories that glow like embers. Night deepens, the fever tightens, his breath slows. The world, once vast enough to swallow all horizons, begins to narrow into a single quiet room. He reaches out, fingers brushing the warm air as if feeling the edge of one more unseen map. Then silence. Across Babylon, lanterns flutter, winds shift. Somewhere, the river sighs, carrying his story like a leaf over dark water. Generals stare at one another, uncertain, like actors who have lost their script. Maps tremble beneath candlelight, each border a question. But beyond walls and politics, soldiers gather near campfires, lifting cups toward the stars. They speak of a king who walked among them, mud on his sandals, ambition in his chest, and fire in his smile. The world will change now. Kingdoms will fracture, wars will bloom, legends will twist and grow. But the memory of Alexander, sharp, bright, restless, will hang in history like a sword suspended above time. And as Babylon's moon drifts through thin clouds, the city sleeps. Softly, quietly, as if honoring the last breath of a dreamer who once tried to wrap the world around his fist. The night softens, and the desert winds settle into a hush, as if the world itself grows tired of movement. Stars glimmer over ancient stone and quiet rivers, their pale light spreading gently across the cradle of old empires. In the stillness, the echoes of marching boots and clashing bronze fade into whispers, drifting like dust through the long corridors of memory. Breathe slowly. Let the weight of armor slide from your shoulders, falling into the cool sand of time. The battles have ended. The maps have been folded. There is no horizon demanding your footsteps tonight. In distant lands, cities once conquered now glow with quiet lamps, windows shimmering like fireflies along the dark. Their people sleep, dreaming of markets and morning bread, unaware of the journey that led them here. Their peace is a testament, a soft candle flame kept alive by the long road west. The gardens of Babylon sway gently in a midnight breeze. Palm leaves rustle like pages turning slowly inside a forgotten book. Somewhere, water trickles along ancient stone, its voice patient, soothing, unhurried. It carries secrets older than any conqueror, older than any crown. Its song invites rest, inviting the heavy eyelids and quiet breaths that gather when the body finally agrees to stillness. Far above, constellations form silent shapes, warriors, chariots, wandering hunters, stories etched in starlight. Yet tonight, their lines blur softly, melting into calming swirls of silver haze. They no longer demand your attention. Instead, they guide your gaze slowly downward toward the comforting dark behind your eyes. Exhale. Memories of drums and bronze fade into distant echoes. Sweat-soaked banners unravel into gentle cloth, fluttering until they become nothing more than feathers drifting lazily down. The roar of elephants becomes the murmur of waves on a quiet shore. Even the sharp ring of steel dissolves, tapering into a soft chime, like glass touching glass in slow celebration. Every step taken across scorching sands, across storm-drowned jungles, across fields of clashing shields. All of them now settle like grains at the bottom of an hourglass, finally at peace. You feel the world cool around you, like a warm blanket settling over tired bones. The tension that once held your heartbeat taut loosens. Your breath becomes slow, steady, shaped by comfort rather than command. The winds carry lullabies through ancient corridors, weaving threads of rest across every tired limb. Even ambition sleeps now, folding itself into a small, quiet ember. Its glow is soft, no longer sharp, promising warmth, but asking nothing in return. Soon, only the river's patient whisper remains. It hums beneath starlight, telling you that dreams are gentle shores and that you have earned your place upon them. Rest now. History will remember. You do not need to hold the weight anymore. Sleep settles like starlight on still water, smooth and unbroken. And slowly, softly, the world falls silent. If you enjoyed this history story, please do not forget to like the video and subscribe. Sweet dreams.